All right, welcome. Let's go ahead and get a moment with silence. And then we'll follow it with the set-aside prayer. God, help us set aside everything we think we know about you, everything we think we know about ourselves, everything we think we know about others, and everything we think we know about our own recovery, so we may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please, please help us see the truth. I stumbled through the end of that again. That's awesome. My name's Justin. I'm an alcoholic. I'm always grateful to be a mean, grateful to be an alcoholic today. Did everybody get one of these? I tried to make sure I passed them all out. All right. Did you want one? Okay. So obviously we're at the final week. It's bittersweet, isn't it? I'm excited, but at the same time a little bummed because it's been a lot of fun. I want to really thank everybody for the opportunity to be here. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you. I was actually on the phone with Tracy beforehand, and the best way I know how to describe it, the little boy within me can't believe he's watching the man who stands here today. The fact that I get to do this is a complete honor and a privilege, and I owe you guys. And that's part of carrying the message, right? So today we're going to talk primarily about carrying the message. We're going to talk about working with others. Step 12, right? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Let's hope that I round that up and talk about everything, but I can't guarantee anything. So having had a spiritual awakening. So most of you guys have all done the work. I think everybody in here has actually done the work. Has anybody started on their 9-step processes at all? Yeah, we got one. All right, we got 2. So that's awesome. And that's a big part of just making that closure. We've gotten closer with God through the other steps as well. Step 4 and 5, we got to know ourselves a little bit better. We shared that with somebody, and we got a little bit more intimate with our Creator, right? And then we went over step 10 and 11 last week as well. And in step 10 and 11, we talked about what it meant to share with others, continue to do this work, and then what it means to have time in the mornings or whenever it is for you to create that intimacy with God, right? So that way we can, again, get to know our Creator on a more intimate level. So in the process of that, I think if we're doing this work, every single day is a day in which we would have an awakening, right? Because I don't live on yesterday's promises. I live on what I do today. I've done some great things over the years, but it's not about what I've done. It's about where I'm at today. What am I doing today? Because if I'm not doing that today, what do I have? I still have a home where my family doesn't always want me there, or perhaps they're afraid of approaching me on things, or, you name it. The amount of things we can add to that just goes on and on, right? So I need to continue, right? As we talked about in step 10. But a big part of that is just continuing to pray, continuing to work, continuing to do the work. And so when we get to this point, now that we've had a spiritual awakening as a result of the first 9 proposals, what do? We carry the message to other alcoholics. So when I was thinking about this today before the meeting, I had no thought of what I was going to come here and say. But what I did know is that I knew what I wanted to present, which is a little bit different, right? I'm hoping that I can light a fire under you guys as much as you guys have lit a fire under me. And that's really the goal here today with this. It's a little bit different than if I'm going one-on-one with sponsees. And I'll get into that in a little bit as well. But, as I was thinking it over this morning, or actually it was this afternoon, I was thinking about how exciting it is to be able to have an opportunity to come up here and talk about one of our favorite things. That's the 12 steps. When we get into the 12th step, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the work, right? We talk about the work that we do. And so there's multiple ways we carry the message. One of them is one-on-one, reaching our hand out at meetings to the new person that shows up. Another one is just talking in meetings, sharing our experience through the book. Truly our experience, right? Where are we at with the book? Where are we at with the literature? Where are we at with prayer? Right? When we share these things, when we share seriously and from the heart, we engage with others and we inspire hope. That is the ultimate goal, isn't it? to inspire hope, to try to get somebody else to get this thing the same way that it was given to me. Because nothing gets me more excited than seeing someone else's eyes light up. And I think that's the same for anybody in this room. Seeing people's eyes light up and not being afraid. You know, it gives us a sense of courage and inspiration. So one of the other things we also do is things like this. You know, and these things like this are great opportunities. I personally love my one-on-ones. I love having one-on-ones with my guys. And here's what I'm going to tell you about the spiritual awakening and practicing these principles in all my affairs. When it comes to working with another human being, nothing works better for me to improve my life in all areas of my life than working with another alcoholic. Because something about working with another alcoholic puts me in a place to where I remember where I come from. And it puts me in a place where I can treat others in a way where I can treat them more like a newcomer, as though they're someone that I want to engage with, get to know. Because that's what you do when you work with a newcomer, right? When I am not doing these things, I don't want to get to know you. I don't want to be around you because you annoy the piss out of me. That's just the way I work, right? But if I'm doing these things, I can be a little bit more lenient. I can be a little bit more loving. I can have the action items that go with it. And it's the same thing with my children. I've noticed if I'm working with other alcoholics, I have a better attitude towards my kids. Matter of fact, I take that same attitude that I take towards the newcomer, towards my kids. I mean, a little bit better, because I'm not going to be as hard tongued, if you will, with my kids like I would a newcomer. You know, I'm not gonna pull my punches with a newcomer on a lot of things. With my kids, I will. But it's still, doing those things with other people and working the steps with another man really puts me in a place to be better with my children. And it's the same way with work. If I'm doing this work, I'm carrying a message. What is that message? It's hope, it's love, it's honesty, it's purity, it's unselfishness, right? Because that's what we're here for. We're trying to get these things. And as we do this, we improve. And it gives me the opportunity to do it better with those people in my life. I have I'm getting ready to switch jobs. I have less than a week left, which I'm really excited about. But there's a bittersweet to it. Because what's happened is I've brought my experience with God. And I said it last week, letting God love me so I can let God love you through me, right? So I do that same thing at work. I don't just do it with the newcomer. I do it at work, just like I do it at home. I bring this message everywhere I go. And I've gotten a lot of warm feedback from people at work on how they're going to miss me. And I'm still that kind of guy that goes, really? You would think that I would have enough sense to go, okay, cool, thank you. But my head goes, really? You like me? That's messed up. You know, and I don't know if that'll ever go away. But, you know, because I'm working with others, I have this attitude where I embrace it. And if I don't work with others, I don't embrace it. Matter of fact, I don't only just question it, I want to pull back. You know, and this helps me move forward and get involved and get engaged with people. So that's part of this whole process, right? So we're going to talk about working with others. I gave you guys a little worksheet here that was given to me by a sponsor I worked with many years ago through In the Steps. And a lot of what we did in the last 6 weeks is pretty similar to what you're going to see in here. This is a little bit more of a breakdown, play through the book. And it also has moving through the 12 and 12. Now, when I say that, I don't believe that the 12, this is just my opinion here. I don't believe that the 12 and 12 is meant for working the steps. The big book is for working the steps. The big book is where we go to work the steps. It's where we get into the work of doing the work out of the steps. But the 12 and 12 complements it, right? When I say it complements it, it's a great piece of work that helps us with the emotional sobriety and an emotional understanding of the step and where we're trying to get at the later levels, right? But also the other thing I do when I go through this guide, when we go through the 12 and 12, I'm also going through the traditions. Because when we're done here, when we're done doing the work, when we get to the point where We're ready to go carry this message to alcoholics, go work with another alcoholic and teach them and show them what we've experienced with the Big Book. Our goal is also to know and understand the traditions. So that way when we go to our home groups and we decide, for those of you who like to get involved in service, when we get involved in service, we understand how the traditions work as well. Now, we could do a whole nother workshop just on the traditions. But the thing that I've always thought was neat about the traditions is if you look at the traditions and you work through them, there's a pattern in there that's very similar to the steps. They can almost correlate step per tradition throughout the whole system. I don't think that was done on purpose. That's just the way it seems to work. Now, it's not 100%, but there is a pattern there with the steps and the traditions. So, talking about that, we're about to get into the book. I'm going to read a little bit here out of the book. And some of the things we're going to get into will be things like what the best part of getting it. Well, let's just read it here. Let me go ahead. So, because we got this very first line when we get into working with others, right? Very first page, working with others. So practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can you can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see the fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. A lot of stuff was said there, right? So what did it say? Intensive work. Intensive work with others. Now, I asked this as a question, but I think most of you have the answer. Are we going to be able to, is every alcoholic that we work with going to get sober? Is every alcoholic that we work with going to get this thing? No. No, matter of fact, we may have more fails than hits, right? If our work is solid, right? If our work is solid, and I'm able to transmit something, and I share my experience out of the book, I have about a 50-50 chance. And it's not up to me, right? Who is it up to that any one of us gets sober? God. It's not up to me. If I had the power to get someone sober or drunk, I would be getting people sober. You know, and I love when people say, well, you're going to get them drunk. I don't agree with that. Now, I will say that there are no wrong ways to sponsor. I disagree. I have found through my own experience, there are no wrong ways to sponsor through the Big Book. If I come to you and I try to get you through these steps through my own ideas, through my own little thing, and not carry you through the steps out of the book, and I try to tell you how to do it, I'm probably going to do a poor job. Now, there's a chance I could probably do well, but there's a pretty good chance I'm going to do a poor job. But if I let the book do the work for me, I have a pretty good chance of carrying the message. Because even though my message is relatable to you, my message could mess you up. It's kind of like what works in your marriage and what works in my marriage are two different things. You know, if you were to try to practice with your wife what I do with my wife, that might not work for you. It actually may create suspicion, right? For some people, or the other way around. I just know that what works in my home works in my home. So as far as that goes, and I know that's a horrible metaphor to some degree, but as far as that goes, I can only carry my experience from my heart out of the book. So I do believe that there can be bad ways to doing sponsorship. Another one would be if I'm trying to, I like to call it bully. And if I'm trying to throw coins at you in a sense. If I'm telling, well, if you need to, you just need to call your sponsor. If I'm barking these little sayings that we hear in meetings all the time at you, I'm not helping you. Matter of fact, you may not even want to approach me and talk to me about what's going on with you. So the goal is to become as approachable as possible, right? Am I bringing an attitude of love, honesty, unselfishness, and purity to the situation? Am I allowing you the opportunity to feel like you can talk to me? If I am coming from a place where that is not the case, then I need to check myself, right? The first 9 proposals again, or continue as it says in 10. I need to continue to watch myself. My goal here today is to try to get you guys excited, because I'm truly excited. Nothing is more fun. So here's a great example. When we have meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, when we have AA meetings, and we go to AA meetings, how am I put this? What is the point? You hear things like, well, we have meetings so we can carry the message to alcoholics. Certainly that's right, to some degree. It's not totally wrong, right? But it's not the only reason why we have meetings. The other one is to get to have a place for them to go when they're ready to go to meetings. Because how many times you go to meetings and you don't have many newcomers? Matter of fact, usually every meeting that I've ever been to, doesn't matter what meeting it is, there's always that lull. There's always that period where there aren't many newcomers coming. Maybe 1, 2, maybe none at all for about 3, 4 months, 6 months, and then all of a sudden they just come in. It's like they come in waves. Has anybody ever experienced that here? Yeah, I've experienced that a few times. So then what do you do in the in-between, right? You go to your meeting, you try to carry your message with each other, you share your experience. Well, hopefully you're not sharing your problems. You're not going to meetings to share your problems. That's what you have a 10-step partner for. That's what you have a sponsor for. The other thing, and this is my firm belief, meetings are a place for us to treat them like pep rallies, because that's what meetings are. Meetings are a place where we bring recovery and the program too. And the program is the 12 steps out of the big book. So are we treating meetings like they're a prep rally? Are we acting like cheerleaders for this thing? Because as we're going to get into, it's going to talk about, we do this because it excites us. It's like the will, right? We have one of 2 choices with the will. It's the will on whether we choose to accept God's will or our will. Am I going to go my route or God's route, right? We have that choice. That's what's beautiful about free will. We have a choice on which way we're going to take it. And I'm hoping to God that most days I'm aligned with God. I'm trying to do what He wants for me. And when I do that, when I go to meetings, my attitude's always, how am I carrying this message to the alcoholic? And sometimes that doesn't, so when we hear those who are suffering in and out of these rooms, how many times have you heard that at a meeting? Whether it's at the end or whatever, when we do our prayers, we pray for those who are suffering in and out of these rooms. You guys remember hearing those things? So does the suffering just mean the newcomer? No, it does not. There are many of us that have time in this program that from time to time we are suffering, right? Because just because we get sober doesn't mean that everything's peaches and cream, right? Sometimes life just hits us. Sometimes we are standing in front of the barrel, and that's just the way life is. I mean, trust me, it wasn't a good feeling when my wife and I had to file for bankruptcy. That wasn't fun. That's not the barrel I want to stand in front of. I want to be able to be sunshines and rainbows all the time. But that's not how it works. So sometimes, even as people that have time, some of us old timers suffer too. We live in pain as well from time to time. So we're not always going to get this right. But here's the beautiful thing. What did the first line say? Let's go back to it, right? Practical experience shows that nothing will so much sure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. So working with other alcoholics, right? So when we're hurting, how many times have you heard stories of people going through tough times and they're like, you know what, I'm going to go pick up a newcomer. And they go work with others and they get out of themselves. And what ends up happening is they get closer with God. I know for me, when I work with others, I'm closer with God. When I don't do this work, I step away a little bit because that's the difference with the will. The will's always there. I just have to choose which way I'm going to take it. Am I going to take it towards the action of God's will or my will? Right? Am I making sense? Okay. So then when we work with alcoholics, I gave you this outline on a plan of how to go through it. And this plan, this little outline, I don't follow it 100%, but I try to follow the principle of it pretty close. And now you can do it how you want. I know guys that they go through the book and they'll read a paragraph at a time with their guys. They'll read a page at a time with their guys and they'll discuss it, right? But the way I do it, and this is just me, when I go through it, I go through my highlights. I have a lot of highlights in my book. What I'll do is I'll ask them, I want you to start reading from the preface all the way through. And as you can see, if you get in here, if you read it, it'll tell you start at the preface through to the doctor's opinion. So I'll have them do that. And then the first time we sit down, we take about an hour to an hour and a half, all depending on what kind of time I have or we have together, right? And we'll read just highlights and we'll talk about that. We'll engage back and forth. And here's what happens. Let's get into the book. So on page 91, looks like the third paragraph in. See your man alone, if possible. At first, engage your general conversation. After a while, turn to talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your own drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak about himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. You will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. And that's a great little thing here, right? So it's just telling us one-on-one what we can do to try to engage and get another fellow to, what's the word I'm looking for? Another fellow to get and tell us more about themselves, right? Because that's what we want. We want to try to get as much information as we can about the person we're working with. And while we're working with that person, if we're sharing our experience through the book, and I don't know about you guys, every single time I go through this book, I get excited. I love going through the steps out of the book. And I'm going to tell you, I spent a lot of time in the first half of the book, all the way up to maybe the fourth step. And when I say that, the reason for that is because I've worked with a lot of guys over the years. And I've had a lot of guys that I'll work with them through the steps. And it usually seems to, from my experience, some people have had them peter out at 4. For some reason, I can get them to do 4, and we can get into the 5th and 6th and 7th step, and they seem pretty excited. And most people seem to peter out in 8 and 9. Most people don't want to make the approach to other people, or they get fear, they get involved, whatever it is. Or here's the other thing that happens. And I firmly believe this. When they get to 8 and 9, once they get to 8 and 9, the promises start to materialize for them. Their life gets a little bit busier, but it's dry. They're not drinking anymore, right? Their life gets a little bit busier. Their home life gets a little bit better. And their work life is getting a little bit better. And they get involved in things outside of meetings, of recovery, of doing the work. That's just been my experience. So as a result, I've spent a lot of time in the very front of this book. Now, not to say that I haven't spent a lot of time in the back, because I've had a numerous amount of men that have recovered and gotten into the rest of the literature as well. And that's equally as exciting. But I will tell you what, I'm grateful for it. There was a time where I was like, man, at one time I didn't understand why I knew the beginning of the book as well as I did the back. It was because of that reason. I was spending a lot of time doing a lot of one-on-ones with guys. And I would have 3 guys a week. So that's the other thing I'll do too. So if you read this outline, this is a week-by-week process. So here's the beautiful thing about the big book. I said it last week, I think, and I know I've said it other weeks. I let the big book do the work. I let the literature do the work. All I do is give them a time slot of when we can sit down once a week and we go through the literature. And if I'm giving them my time once a week, at that point, what they do with their recovery is up to them. If God is going to enter their heart, God is going to enter their heart. So when we represent the 12 steps to an alcoholic, what is our ultimate goal? It's not to get them sober. It's not to get them recovered. We'd like to think so, right? My ego tells me it is. Our goal is not only to give them hope. Our ultimate goal is to have them get this same experience with God. It's to help them get a God consciousness and a spiritual experience. And that is the ultimate goal. That is our true responsibility, is to have them. And how do we do it? Well, the big book and the 12 steps are so beautifully outlined, they tell us how to do it. We don't have to come up with some magic formula. The Oxford Group and Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and the First 100 did that for us. And I don't know about you, for an alcoholic like me, that's pretty freaking awesome. Because I need someone to give me direction. I need someone to spell it out for me. I actually need someone to explain to me what a resentment is so I know I have one. Because when I first came in here, I didn't know what a resentment was. When I first started hearing things about resentments, I never said, oh, I don't think I have any. Matter of fact, what I said was, I probably do. I have no idea what it is. So, I mean, if you guys all had them, I'm sure I had them too. And it was when I discovered what a resentment was, I was like, well, yeah, I have a lot of rehashed anger, a lot. You know, and I used to always say when it came to anger, you know, it's one of those things like, I'm really good at measuring it. I could sit here and say, oh, I'm not angry. You should see me when I'm angry. You know, that's just another form of measuring anger, right? So I was pretty comfortable living with it. And then I always talk about us alcoholics are very good at being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? And how do we get out of that? We work with other alcoholics. Nothing is going to do more for me and for you than that work. So let's see what else the book has, so that way you're not just listening to me talk the whole time. So what do we do if the alcoholic doesn't want to do this thing? Here's the answer. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. So there's a great example. I'm that guy. I'm a little bit harder. I'm a nice guy, right? But I'm a little bit harder around the edges when it comes to sponsoring people. You know, I'm a firm believer that if you want somebody to hold your hand, there's plenty of people out there that'll do that for you. I am not that guy. I'm not here to hold your hand. And you know why I'm not here to hold your hand? Because I don't want you to hold my hand. I want to continue to grow in this thing. I'm still just as messed up. Well, maybe not just as messed up when I walked in here, but I'm still a messed up guy from time to time. I still have a messed up head. My thinking can get to me, and I can dominate the world by will, right? So I want somebody to call me on my bullshit. I want somebody that's strong enough in my life that when I talk to them, they're going to help me improve. They're going to help me work through these things. Here's the beautiful thing. When we work with others, that's what happens to us as well. That same process happens to us, because what happens when we work with others? So I always like to talk about the triangle. So the triangle is service, unity, and recovery, right? So now we've just talked about two aspects of that. We talked about the service of it, and we've talked about the recovery of it, right? So, and what's the recovery of it? When I'm working with other people, I'm engaged in the steps too. Because even though they're the ones doing the work at this point, I'm still deeply engaged. Because what did I talk about a few weeks ago? We're not in this alone, right? We do this as a journey together, right? So when I worked with my sponsor, I was able to work through every aspect of that, doing the 9th step work and everything with my sponsor. I didn't have to go these things alone. And I'm sure as you guys were going through the 4th and 5th step work, And now continuing with your 9-step work, you're feeling the same way. You're not in this alone. You have a partner in this thing called life, right? Well, so when I'm working with another guy and I'm seeing the miracle change, I'm seeing the miracle happen in his life, I'm being transformed. I'm being given hope. Because when I see the hope light up in your eyes, nothing lights me up more than seeing the hope light up in your eyes. And when I see the hope light up in your eyes, it gives me this attitude like I'm on the right path. Life is good, even though sometimes I'm stepping on thorns. And that's the beautiful thing about this. So we don't waste our time on a guy who doesn't want it. We keep moving forward. So when you work with others, how many times have you worked with people that have said that if I could just get things together, if I could just, if me and my wife could just get along, my life would be better. If my boss, if I could just get a little bit more respect, or my boss would respect me, or if I could make more money, maybe life will be better. I'm not sure how much I really need this thing. I just know that, if this gets better for me or whatever, right? So here on 98, he clamors for this and that, claiming that he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife. We simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God. So again, that God thing, right? Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man, then he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trusts God and clean house. So that's a pretty powerful statement. So trust God. That's coming from a place where we come in here some of us come in here not believing in God. And I'll tell you what my experience, and we talked about two-way prayer last week. Here's my experience. I had really amazing prayer life for a long time. Really amazing prayer life for a long time. Great morning meditation prayer. It was good. When I started doing two-way prayer, it got better. And I told you guys that this week. Here's the one thing that hit me hard. Now, I know that sometimes I lack faith in God. I know that sometimes I lack trust in God. But what I learned in my two-way prayer is how powerful that lack of faith and how powerful that lack of trust could be. Right? So if I want to get better, I have to first trust God. Do I wholeheartedly trust God? And that's what we're trying to give the same thing to a newcomer. We're trying to get them to that position where they can trust God. Right? We just read that. We're developing a new brand of faith. So that was 98. So now we're up here on 100. So I talked about walking hand in hand, right? I talked about we're not in this alone. This work with others keeps us doing the work. So that's part of doing the recovery, right? Keeps me in the recovery boat. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. It's a pretty powerful statement, I think. And it's a pretty solid statement. It's telling me flat out, we're walking in hand. We're doing this thing together, but through God, I have a way, way better life than I could ever ask for. And who here hasn't had that experience? Who here hasn't gone through the steps and not had that experience? I think everybody that comes into these rooms, the reason why we love this program so much when we get on fire with this thing is for that same reason. Because if I would have came in here and gave you a list of things to make my life beautiful, it sure in the hell wouldn't have been where I'm standing right now today. It wouldn't have been what has been dreamt up for me by God himself. It wouldn't have been my idea. So, and before I forget, to complete that circle, The third aspect is unity, right? So we do things together. We get into the fellowship. And the fellowship is sometimes just as simple as showing up 5-10 minutes before a meeting and staying 5-10 minutes after a meeting. It doesn't always mean that I need to go to the big events. It doesn't mean that I have to go to every little thing that happens. It doesn't mean that I have to go to all these district things. If I just show up 5-10 minutes before the meeting and hang out 5-10 minutes after the meeting, and that doesn't mean I just stand in a corner and feel sorry for myself. That means I'm out there shaking hands, talking to people, sharing where I'm at today. Because if you want to talk about what's going on with you, do it before and after the meeting. And I'm a firm believer in that. I don't go to meetings and talk about my problems. If I've got a resentment with my wife, I don't bring it to the meeting. I bring it to you beforehand. I bring it to you after. When I go to a meeting, I'm here to be a cheerleader. I'm here to get excited about the program in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, you can do like it says in the book and say, you know what, that could work for me too. Or yes, I want this thing. You guys know where I'm talking about in the big book in the very beginning where it says this? And it's very true. That is what our purpose is when we go to meetings, is to be, again, I'm going to say a cheerleader. I hope that after today, most of you are excited enough to go to your meeting and go, you know what, where am I at with this literature? And how can I share it with you? Because if you've gone to enough meetings, let me put it this way. If you've never gone to a bad meeting, you're not going to enough meetings. Because there has been times, now my current home group, I cannot say this. My current home group, you know, you hear people say these things all the time, but my current home group is probably one of the best groups, the best meetings that I've been into for a very long time. I cannot praise it enough. And I would say if you haven't been there, go ahead and show up and make it. But all of you guys have been there. And I think you guys can agree, you know. And again, I thank you for all my home group members for being here. It is truly one of the best meetings. But there's been times over the years where I've been to home group meetings and walked out of there going, that wasn't really a good meeting. And the reason why I say that is because, again, if you're not experiencing bad meetings, you're just not going to enough of them. Because sometimes I'm going to walk into a meeting and I'm just not feeling it that day. I mean, hell, I walked in last night and I wasn't in the mood. I mean, you may not have seen it, you may not have known it, but I wasn't in the mood. I wasn't in the mood to be at the meeting. I wasn't in the mood to be at pep rally for this thing. I just wasn't in the mood. But I walked out of there feeling high as a kite. And what's amazing is I get to get high again without the drug. Nothing beats that feeling. Nothing beats the feeling of going to a meeting and feeling like hope was spread. And now I get to get high again. I get to get high on the spirit of love. I get to get high on the spirit of unselfishness. I get to get high on the attitude of purity. That is truly to me, that there's nothing more beautiful than that. And I get to get high on being honest. Talk about being honest. We come to these meetings and we share and we talk about things that you're not going to hear anybody anywhere else. You're going to hear us laugh about things that you're not going to hear. Most people would think we were batshit crazy, and perhaps we are. Perhaps we are. I have no idea. But I'd rather be this crazy than the crazy I was when I walked in here 20 years ago. All right, so the last page was 100. Let's see where we're at next. So it looks like 102. So it says here, so, and I talk about this all the time, so talk about being maximum, right? Sometimes in my prayer and meditation in the morning, I will ask God, when I'm not feeling, when I don't have any dissent, I don't have anything that's pressing, I don't have anything that's in my life that's too tough, I will ask God to help me be maximum, whatever that is. Help me be the maximum me. Help me be maximum today. I sometimes will just ask that flat question, right? So let's hear what it's talking about when it says maximum here, because again, we're talking about working with others. Your job now is to be at a place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others, and so never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid places on earth. So, on such an errand. Sorry, I messed up on that one. Keep on the firing line of life with those motives, and God will keep you unharmed. The point of that whole paragraph is that we should be willing to go to just about any length wherever we have to go to carry the message. But here's what's beautiful about Alcoholics Anonymous today. When this book was written, they didn't have meetings like we do today. They didn't have a meeting on every corner. They didn't have a meeting every mile from each other like they do today, or 20 or 30 of them within miles from each other like what we do today. They had them scattered here and there, and they didn't put emphasis on meetings like we do today. Now, today, we put a huge emphasis on meetings, as though it's the most important thing. I'm not sure if that's true. I actually think that prayer and meditation is much more important than that. I think getting a connection with God is much more important than that. And trying to help others do that same thing is much more important than that. I go to 2 meetings consistently every week, but I sit down with other people more than once a week usually. I'll have 1 to 2 guys typically when I'm only doing 2 meetings a week. I always talk about what am I doing in the in-between, right? So again, about personal recovery. What am I doing in between? In some form or fashion, I'm working with another alcoholic. And when I'm working with another alcoholic, that meeting is just as powerful for me as it is going to a meeting. Matter of fact, I will gladly skip a meeting. That's not my home group. I will gladly skip a meeting if it means I'm going to be sitting down with another alcoholic. If I have to empty a time slot for a guy that wants this thing, and I don't have time other than the time that I go to my meeting, one of my meetings that is not my home group, I will give up that time for that man. Because that is my job. My job is to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And I'm not doing my job if I'm not doing that, if I'm not willing to do that. Now, some of you may have time. You guys, some of you may have the time to continue to go to 4 meetings a week and pick up another day with another guy, and pick up another day with another guy, and pick up a day with another guy. I don't. Balance in my life is very important. And when I say that, I cannot emphasize that enough. I was on the phone with a buddy of mine before the meeting tonight, and he is hemming and hawing about starting a meeting that he wants to start for an ACA program. And he keeps going back and forth. And as we were talking, he says, he actually, I took it as a great compliment. He said, I started thinking about you. It was about a year ago. We started a Monday night meeting, right? About a year ago. We started a meeting on Monday nights. So I took time out of my schedule. I added another meeting to my schedule, and that's what became my home group today. But a few of us started a new meeting on Monday nights. And then as time went on, now we're doing this thing on Tuesdays. I had my meeting on Thursdays, and I got a meeting on Fridays. In between that, I'm meeting guys. I just recently gave up I gave up my Thursday when I came here, because when I talk about balance, it's important that I'm at home. It's important that I'm there with my family. It's important that I'm putting the time in with the people that matter in my life. Because if I'm doing this 100% of the time, I may be feeling high, but my family's being neglected. So it's very important to me that I'm putting that time in there too. So I try to balance that to where I'm putting the equal amount of time into the time with my family as I am into my meetings. And the beautiful thing is if I spend 3 to 4 days a week going through the big book with a new guy, going through the big book at my home group, and then going through another meeting, this sounds like a lot, right? That's what, 5 to 6 hours a week that I'm sitting down, a little bit longer than that, because let's give it 2 hours per. So that's 12 hours a week. 12 hours a week that I'm spending doing the work for Alcoholics Anonymous. How much time am I spending at home with the family as well? That is very important to me. And that's what balance is trying to find what works for each individual. Because we want to be useful, right? I can't be useful if I have dissent. If I have something at my house where I'm unsettled because my family's unhappy that I'm not there, I'm unhappy. I'm irritated. I'm not spending enough time with them. They're irritating me. They don't understand, right? I may justify it. They don't get it. They don't understand AA. They don't get what this thing's all about. They don't know why I'm doing this. Oh, if they just understand, right? And that's how sometimes we say things like that, right? Because we know how important this is to us. This is very important to us. But if I get lopsided, I'm unhappy in meetings too. And if I'm unhappy in meetings, what message am I carrying to you? It's very important that I'm coming here and carrying the message from my heart. And so as much as I carry the message out of the book, I got to carry my heart to you. And I can't carry my heart to you other than a stream of bullshit that comes out of my mouth that sounds good in meetings, right? I can sound good in meetings all I want. But if I'm not sharing and feeling good prior till, that's all it is bullshit. And I say this because I've seen it time and time again with alcoholics that are miserable in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've seen it time and time again where alcoholics will get 30 years, or they'll have 20 years, or they'll have 15 years, and they're at home blowing their brains out, literally, because they're depressed and they're miserable and they're lost. I know for me, I don't want to be that. And those kinds of things are good reminders for me. So I know I'm kind of babbling on here. I do appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. I really hope that I covered most of that material well. It's very important that when we walk out of here today that we're ready to go and carry this message. And I know for me, coming in here today has excited me. Before I came in here today, I was literally at work and I just wasn't, not that I wasn't feeling it because I couldn't wait to be here, right? But I wasn't thinking about it really. I just was allowing myself to just enjoy my day. And at one point, I started to get excited about the idea of just being able to do this. I was getting excited just about the idea of carrying the message and what that means. What it means to have the opportunity to just carry the message. Nothing gets me more excited. And every time I would think about it, I was doing all this work in front of me, and occasionally some of the work was crap. And I would start doing it, and I would run into a problem, and I would start thinking about you guys, and I would think about the opportunity you guys gave me, and then I would just see the work and be like, I'll just get through it whenever I get through it. You know, it gave me a better attitude. So again, working with others, right? So anyway, I really appreciate you listening. Has anybody got any questions? Awesome. Awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and end it with the Lord's Prayer. Thank you. All right, who keeps us sober? Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thou is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Sucks if you don't.